All right, welcome to the track guide for Tsukuba circuit. Best lap I did was a 1020. Again, probably a little bit of time coming off of that once we practice a little bit more. Weather conditions, partly cloudy, 18 degrees Celsius, air temp, track temp 28. This is the 1020, so we'll play it and then we'll talk about the next lap. All right, there you go. That's a 1020. Let's get into it. Come to turn one. I'm looking at this pavement here as a reference point. See where the color changes in this pavement is pretty much where I'm starting to brake. It's an uphill, so you can brake fairly hard, but that's where I'm starting to use the initial braking. So you can see here, fairly hard going uphill, and then as I'm coming off, I'm not turning in too tightly here, kind of just following the darker tire grooves. And then once I get closer to the middle of the corner, you'll see I go kind of for a late downshift into first gear. And that's when I really start turning in a little bit more. And then back on throttle. Coming to this second turn here, second braking area anyway. You can really use portion of this track here. And that's pretty much what I use for my brake marker as well. When I get to this spot here is kind of where I start braking. So you'll see I cut this corner a little bit here, hard on the brakes. Again, I go for kind of a late downshift into first. Hug this one nice and tight. Back on throttle pretty strong again. Nice and wide out on this one, then come back immediately to the left here. The next kind of braking, you're not going to do much braking, but you see where there's like a bit of a dirt patch here is kind of a braking reference. You just get a little bit on the brakes just to get that front end turned in. The weight transfer, you'll see right about there. See just very little amount. Back on throttle immediately. This corner here, you want to hold as tight as possible. You really want to get those left tires just on the edge of that dirt so you don't wash out too wide. Because I find if you turn in a little too late for this one, it's easy to just understeer wide and you got to lift off and then scrub speed. But if you hold it really tight, that's the best line for it. Coming to this one here, you're basically using where this track straightens out. So you're coming around this corner here, and right where it starts to straighten out, that's kind of where my braking reference is. So you'll see here, bam, that's where it straightens out really hard on the brakes. Coming into this one pretty aggressive, you're kind of going to V it. So you're kind of coming in early, but then you're kind of holding it a little bit wider and then turning in again. You see here, I kind of push a little bit wider of the curbing. I don't come straight down to it. Right where this marker here, I'm pretty close to the curbing, and then I'll push out a little bit wide, and then I'll come right back down to it again. So here I'm a little bit closer. Now I'm pushing out wide. Now I'm turning in extra, and then back on throttle. Getting nice and tight. Full throttle all the way to the edge of the track here. Next braking reference, basically the start of this tire wall. Nice late entry into this one. And you'll follow kind of the seam in the middle of the track. And right about in the middle of the corner is when I start coming off that seam and then for a later apex. So again, braking reference, here we go. Not too hard, following the seam of this track here. Right about where this green stuff starts happening, that's when I start turning in a little bit more, try to get as close as I can to this curbing. And again, watching the throttle, you're pretty early on to the throttle, just kind of managing, and you can come out nice and wide. You can have all 4 tires into this green area and you will not get an off track. And then that's kind of the best way to get around this track. We'll do the fire chase, adjust it, and this will be the fire chase view of this lap. Let's go back to the lap. And there you go. That's the track guide for Tsukuba.